Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into your research on criminal psychology. You sent over this classic text on the subject, and I gotta say, this is right up my alley. I'm really interested to see what gems we uncover today, especially, since you're so interested in the legal side of things. Understanding how people's minds work in that context is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because the book really emphasizes that justice isn't this abstract concept. It's a
Yeah.
human process. It's carried out by people, for people, and about people. And it really argues that to understand crime and how we respond to it, you have to understand the psychology of everyone involved. The witnesses, the suspects, the lawyers, even the judges.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. It reminds me of that story in the book about the suspect in the child murder case. He's denying any involvement, right? But then at the same time, he's making this very specific hand gesture that seems to contradict everything he's saying.
Right. And it's a great example of how much we communicate through body language, sometimes without even realizing it. That's why being able to read those nonverbal cues is so crucial in criminal investigations. It's like a whole other layer of information, that can either support or contradict what someone is saying out loud.
So basically, detectives and lawyers should be taking a crash course in body language 101.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's not just about catching someone in a lie either. It's about understanding their emotional state, their level of confidence or anxiety.
Mhm.
All of that can be incredibly valuable in a legal setting.
It makes you wonder how much we're all giving away without realizing it through our body language. I'm definitely going to be more conscious of my hand gestures from now on. But going back to that idea of contradiction, the book also talks about how easily witnesses can be swayed by what they hear, especially if a confession has already been made.
Absolutely. The text really dives deep into the power of suggestion and how even the most well-intentioned witnesses can end up adapting their memories to fit a pre-existing narrative. Think about it.
Wow.
Our brains are wired to try to make sense of things, to try to create a story. So if we're presented with a confession, even if it's later proven false, it can unconsciously influence how we remember the events.
So it's not even about people intentionally lying. It's more about how our brains try to make sense of information, even if it means tweaking our memories a bit.
Exactly. It's a subconscious process, but it has huge implications for the legal system. It highlights the importance of really scrutinizing eyewitness accounts and not taking them at face value. Even a small detail that seems insignificant could be the result of suggestion rather than a genuine recollection.
It's like our memories are more like impressions than perfect recordings, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. They're very malleable, subject to change and influence. And this is where understanding the psychology of testimony comes in. The book really explores how a whole range of factors can impact a witness's ability to observe, remember, and report information accurately. Things like age, gender, emotional state, even something as simple as feeling homesick can have a significant impact.
Right. I mean, if you're feeling stressed or anxious, it's going to be harder to focus and remember details clearly. And the book actually mentions this pretty fascinating statistic about how age affects our ability to hear. Apparently, only about 10% of people over 50 could hear a sound at a certain distance compared to almost 80% of people under 18.
Yeah, it's a surprising finding.
Yeah.
But it highlights how even these seemingly minor physiological differences can have a big impact on what we perceive and how we remember events. This is why it's so important for legal professionals to be aware of these factors and adjust their approach accordingly when interviewing witnesses.
So it's not just about asking the right questions, it's about understanding the person you're talking to and the factors that might be influencing their perception and memory. It really adds another layer of complexity to the whole process.
It does. And it reminds us that there's no such thing as a perfectly objective witness. Everyone brings their own experiences, biases, and limitations to the table. The key is to be aware of those factors and to evaluate testimony accordingly. Speaking of biases, the book spends quite a bit of time discussing physiognomy. You know how we judge people based on their appearance, especially their facial features and hands?
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise to me. I mean, I know we all make snap judgments about people based on how they look, but I didn't realize it was an entire field of study.
Well, it's a controversial one for sure.
Yeah.
The book acknowledges that there's really no scientific basis for judging someone's character based solely on their physical features. But it is interesting to see how this idea has persisted throughout history and how it still influences our perceptions of others, whether we're conscious of it or not.
I guess it goes back to that idea of trying to make sense of the world around us. We're always looking for patterns and clues that will help us understand and predict people's behavior.
Exactly. And physiognomy, despite its lack of scientific validity, it really plays into that desire. It gives us this framework, however flawed, for making these judgments about people based on their appearance.
The book even calls the hand man's second face, saying that it can reveal just as much about a person's character as their actual face. It's a pretty bold statement. Have you ever found yourself looking at someone's hands and trying to analyze their personality?
Maybe subconsciously. But I think it's important to remember that these are just interpretations, not definitive truths. Our hands are definitely expressive tools, and they can reveal things about our occupation or our health, even our emotional state. But I'd be hesitant to say that they hold the key to unlocking someone's entire personality.
Fair enough. It's a fascinating concept, but like you said, we have to be careful about drawing sweeping conclusions based on limited information.
Exactly. And I think that's a good principle to keep in mind as we continue to delve into this world of criminal psychology. It's all about observing, analyzing, interpreting, but always with a healthy dose of skepticism and awareness of our own biases.
Speaking of observing and analyzing, the book also talks about the role of habit in influencing our actions. And it's not just about everyday routines, it's about how these deeply ingrained habits can affect our behavior, even in extreme situations like criminal acts.
Right. The book argues that our habits can become so ingrained that they kind of take over even when we're not consciously thinking. It's like our brains go into autopilot mode
Yeah.
and we act on instinct without fully processing what's happening.
There's this really amazing story in the book about the man who threw a brush at an intruder completely unconsciously because he was in the habit of sleeping with it in his hand. I mean, it sounds almost comical, but it really highlights how powerfully our habits can influence our actions, even in these moments of stress or danger.
Absolutely. It's a great illustration of how our past experiences and routines can shape our present behavior, even in ways that we don't fully realize.
So, understanding someone's habits could be really crucial for investigators who are trying to reconstruct events or determine intent, especially in cases where the person's actions seem out of character.
Exactly. Habits can provide these valuable insights into someone's typical behavior patterns, which can then be helpful in understanding why they might have acted in a certain way.
So far, we've covered a lot of ground, from body language to the power of suggestion to the rule of habit. It's amazing how much psychology plays into every aspect of the legal system, and there's still so much more to unpack.
Definitely. We've only just scratched the surface of this fascinating subject. Women, not just physically, but, in terms of their psychological makeup and how they respond to different social pressures. It's a sensitive area, for sure. But I really appreciate how the book tries to navigate those complexities without resorting to just these big generalizations.
Yeah, it definitely caught my attention too. The book doesn't shy away from exploring how those differences can actually manifest in a legal context.
Yeah.
And it really emphasizes that recognizing these distinctions is crucial for anyone who works within the justice system.
Right. And I think the book's main point is that women aren't inherently, better or worse than men when it comes to crime. They're just different. Their motivations, their thought processes, the way they react to stressful situations, all of these things can be influenced by social expectations and the roles that they've been conditioned to play.
I thought the book's analysis of what they call feminine conceit was really interesting. It argues that women are often raised to seek validation through their appearance and their relationships with men, and that this can, in some cases, contribute to their actions, even, criminal ones.
Yeah, it's a thought-provoking idea for sure.
Yeah.
And while I wouldn't want to oversimplify things, it does make you think about how societal expectations and gender roles can impact someone's self-perception and ultimately their choices. It's not about excusing behavior, but about understanding the complex interplay of factors that contribute to it.
It also made me think about how those social pressures might play out differently in a courtroom setting. Like, if women are conditioned to seek approval and validation, how might that affect their interactions with lawyers or judges or even juries? It adds this whole other layer of complexity to the idea of, what a fair trial is.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the book does touch on the challenges of dealing with women in legal settings, suggesting that their communication styles and their emotional responses might differ significantly from men's.
Right. It's like we're all operating from different sets of social scripts, and those scripts can sometimes clash in unexpected ways, especially in a high-pressure environment like a courtroom.
Exactly. And this is where understanding the psychology of both genders becomes so essential. It's about recognizing that communication is this two-way street and being sensitive to the subtle cues and nuances that might be influencing the interaction.
So it's not just about what's being said, it's about how it's being said and how it's being interpreted through this lens of gender and social conditioning.
Precisely. And I think that leads perfectly into the next area we should discuss, which is children as witnesses. This is another area where the book really emphasizes the importance of understanding the unique psychology at play.
Yeah, it's always been fascinating to me because, kids can be such observant witnesses. Sometimes they pick up on details that adults might miss, but at the same time, they're more susceptible to suggestion and misinterpretation. It's a tricky balance.
Absolutely. The book makes the point that children are often more honest than adults. They haven't yet learned to kind of filter or manipulate their responses in the same way. But their understanding of the world is still developing. And that can lead to them misinterpreting events or being easily influenced by leading questions.
Yeah, I remember that study the book mentioned where a pretty significant percentage of the children had never been to the woods or didn't even know how bread was made from grain. It really highlights how their limited experience can impact their ability to accurately recount events, especially if those events involve things they don't fully understand.
Yeah, it's a great example. And it underscores the need for investigators and other legal professionals to be incredibly careful when interviewing children. They need to use age-appropriate language, avoid leading questions, and be sensitive to the fact that a child might not have the same vocabulary or conceptual understanding as an adult.
It's also interesting to think about the emotional factors that are at play, too. Children are often eager to please adults, especially authority figures, so they might be more likely to say what they think the adult wants to hear, even if it's not entirely accurate.
Exactly. They might also be afraid to contradict an adult or to admit that they don't understand something. So creating a safe and supportive environment where children feel comfortable sharing their experiences truthfully, without fear of judgment or reprisal is crucial.
This all makes me wonder how much weight should be given to a child's testimony in court. On one hand, they can be incredibly perceptive and honest, but on the other hand, their lack of experience and their susceptibility to suggestion makes their accounts, potentially unreliable.
Right. It's a complex issue, and there's no easy answer. The book emphasizes that each case really needs to be evaluated on its own merits, taking into account all the factors involved, including the child's age, their developmental stage, and the circumstances surrounding the events in question.
It's definitely a reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to criminal psychology. Each individual, whether it's a suspect or a witness or a victim, brings their own unique set of experiences and psychological complexities to the table.
I agree. And recognizing those individual differences is absolutely essential for ensuring a fair and just legal process.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that human behavior isn't always predictable or easily categorized. There are always layers beneath the surface, and it's our job to try to unravel those layers and understand the motivations, the perceptions, and the emotional states that drives people's actions.
Right, and sometimes those actions, even criminal ones, can be driven by forces that are outside of our conscious control. Like the book mentioned, sometimes we're just running on autopilot, guided by these deeply ingrained habits that take over before we even have time to think.
That's right. And that concept of habit applies to everyone, not just those involved in criminal activity. We all have routines and patterns of behavior that shape our daily lives. It's fascinating to think about how those habits might influence our reactions in unexpected situations, how they might lead us to make choices we wouldn't otherwise make.
It's a reminder that we're not always as rational or in control as we think we are. Our past experiences and our ingrained habits, they can exert a powerful influence on our present behavior, even in ways we don't fully realize.
And that brings us back to the importance of understanding the psychology of everyone involved in the legal process. We can't just focus on the actions, we have to look at the motivations, the perceptions, the emotional states that contributed to those actions.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, trying to get to the core of what drives human behavior. And the deeper you go, the more complex and nuanced it becomes.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this field so fascinating and so crucial for ensuring that justice is served.
So we've talked about how our perceptions and memories can be unreliable, how our habits can influence our actions, how aging and social biases can affect our perceptions, and how understanding the psychology of each individual is crucial for navigating the complexities of the legal system. It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's also incredibly fascinating, and it really highlights the importance of this field of study. Criminal psychology isn't just about understanding criminals, it's about understanding human nature in all of its complexity.
Hey, speaking of human nature, there's one area we haven't touched on yet, and that is nonverbal communication. The book spends quite a bit of time discussing how our body language, our facial expressions, even our posture can reveal a lot about our hidden thoughts and
Yeah,
emotions.
it's like a whole other language that we're speaking, often without even realizing it. And becoming fluent in that language can be incredibly valuable, especially in a legal setting.
It's almost like becoming a human lie detector, being able to spot those micro expressions, those subtle shifts in body language that betray what someone is really thinking or feeling, even when their words are saying something completely different.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. It's not about, you know, reducing human behavior to simple formulas or claiming we can read minds or anything like that. But by understanding the principles of nonverbal communication, we can become more attuned to those subtle cues, those inconsistencies between what someone is saying and what their body language is conveying.
So it's not just about listening to the words, it's about paying attention to the whole picture, the tone of voice, the facial expressions, the gestures, all of it.
Exactly. And this ability to kind of read those nonverbal cues can be incredibly valuable in a legal context. It can help investigators um, assess the credibility of a witness or help lawyers understand the emotional state of a client or even a jury. And it can even help judges decipher the true intentions behind someone's words.
It's amazing to think about how much information we're constantly sending and receiving through our nonverbal communication, often without even being aware of it.
It is. And learning to decode those messages can give us a much deeper understanding of ourselves and others. And it can certainly be a valuable tool in the pursuit of justice.
Yeah, it sounds like becoming more aware of our own nonverbal cues and learning to read those of others could be a really useful skill, not just in legal settings, but, in everyday life as well.
Absolutely. It can really enhance our communication skills, help us build stronger relationships, even give us an edge in negotiations. I mean, we're all constantly communicating whether we realize it or not.
This whole deep dive into your criminal psychology research has been so insightful. We've covered so much ground from like the impact of suggestion on witnesses, the role of habit, those differences between men and women, the complexities of children's testimony,
Yeah.
the challenges of aging, and even, the importance of just being aware of our own biases, both conscious and unconscious. And now we've even touched on this whole fascinating world of nonverbal communication.
Yeah, it's been a really great discussion. And I think it just highlights how crucial it is for anyone involved in the legal system, or frankly, anyone who's interested in human behavior,
Hmm.
to have like a solid grasp of psychology. It's not just about understanding the criminal mind, it's about understanding the human mind and all its complexity and
Yeah.
how those complexities then play out in a legal context.
Yeah, it definitely makes you realize that there's no simple formula for determining guilt or innocence or predicting how someone will act in a given situation. It's all about understanding the individual, their motivations, their perceptions, their emotional state, and how all of those factors kind of interact with the pressures and the expectations of the legal system.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that human behavior is rarely black and white. There are always shades of gray, nuances, layers of complexity that we really need to unravel if we want to truly understand what drives people's actions. And that's what makes this field so challenging, but also so fascinating.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has really opened my eyes to the importance of psychology, not just in the courtroom, but really in all aspects of life. It makes you realize how much we take for granted about how our minds work and how easily our perceptions and judgments can be influenced by factors that we're not even aware of.
It's a humbling realization, and it just underscores the need for constant self-reflection, for questioning our assumptions, and for being open to new perspectives. After all, the more we understand about human behavior, the better equipped we are to navigate the complexities of our world and to build a more just and compassionate society.
Well said. So, to our listeners, I hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the power of psychology and maybe even inspired you to explore this fascinating subject further.
And remember, next time you find yourself in a courtroom or even just observing a conversation, pay attention to those nonverbal cues. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.